a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Why have thousands of aspiring authors teamed up with Christian Faith Publishing to publish their book? Because Christian Faith Publishing is an author-friendly publisher who understands that your labor is more than just a book. We provide authors freedom and flexibility throughout the publishing process, professional book editing, award-winning design, and some of the highest royalty structures in the publishing industry. And as always, you will retain 100% of the rights to your book.
I was looking to find a company that I could trust, one that assisted in the editing process completely.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
Christian Faith Publishing will publish, market, and sell your books in all major bookstores, online booksellers, as well as specialty Christian bookstores. Call for your free author submission kit.
800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. 800-978-4812. That's 800-978-4812.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Good evening, Johnson County. Welcome to this week's episode of The Breakdown. I'm your host, Greg Cooper, and here on The Breakdown, we deep dive local politics, mainly school boards and city councils, but any and all Johnson County politics are on the table. We air most Thursdays at 5 p.m. You can visit the JoCo Community Radio Facebook page to watch shows live or to see replays. Also, you can go to www.jococommunityradio.com where Apple and Android apps are available. Tune in to get the ins and outs of Johnson County, Texas. Tonight is round 3 of our Central Appraisal District and the fight to get the people's candidates and open up some transparency and stuff here on the Central Appraisal District and how it operates. We're going to rehash exactly what the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors does and how we get there and why this is important. Tonight's show, it's meant to educate, inform, and introduce listeners to some individuals who are throwing their hat into the arena and trying to make a positive impact on their community, mainly involving the property tax process. One of the hottest topics and points of frustration over the last few years has been the ever-increasing, astronomically ascending property taxes and the appraisals, and citizens in Johnson County are just frustrated with this. The state level to the local level, there's layers and layers of redundant and confusing policies, codes, and laws. They're hard to find, hard to understand, and complicated, which make it basically a full-time job to even begin to remotely understand how this process works. To address the elephant in the room of what exactly is the Central Appraisal District and why it's imperative that citizens pay closer attention to it and get involved with it, here is a definition of what the Central Appraisal District is. It's taken directly from the state comptroller's website. Appraisal districts are responsible for appraising property for property tax purposes for each taxing entity that imposes property taxes on property in the appraisal district. An appraisal district is established in each county and has the same boundaries as the county's boundaries. So whatever county you live in, that is your taxing district. An appraisal district it's a political subdivision of the state, and it's governed by a board of directors. However, that board of directors are not elected by us, the people. Voting member taxing units are entitled to vote on the appointment of members to the board of directors. Those are our city council members that we elect. Those are school board members that we elect. But we, the people, do not have the luxury or the fought for and secured through blood shed for our country to actually vote for this board of directors. The board of directors are required and have duties and authority under Texas law. Tax Code Chapter 6 contains much of the statutory authority for board of directors. But the bottom line is this: the main taxing entities, they're your county, your local city councils, and your local school districts, as we stated. And school districts, independent school districts, take up the largest chunk, anywhere from about 2/3 to sometimes up to as much as 3/4 of the amount of money you pay in property taxes. These taxing entities, they need your tax revenue to operate. The county, city councils, and school districts, they nominate and elect, like we said, the individuals who are intimately involved with the process of how your property values appraised. So why are we doing a third show here? Well, we began this series during the nomination process, and we were successful in getting individuals from the community that have taken a stand and guaranteed that they will open up the process regarding transparency. We got them nominated. Well, now we're in the voting part of this, and we're going to walk through who's voted so far and where they're at, and who's voted for these people and who have chosen to keep the status quo. But we as residents of Johnson County, we got the ability to stay involved with this and to make our voices heard and to pull back the covers on the Central Appraisal District, the way it operates, and influence the process to be more transparent. So tonight we're going to introduce the one candidate who's running, one that's not here with us. They've secured 2 spots. Miss Amy Lingo and Mr. Wood have both successfully secured seats. That gives less than the majority. So it is very imperative that we all pay attention so we can all have the majority here. And so this process can move forward. So it's very, very important that we get 1, but hopefully 2 more of the nominees actually elected. Tonight, first, we're going to talk about Mr. Craig Hundley, and he's been instrumental in this for 4.5 years now. Mr. Hundley, he needs no introduction. He has a Facebook group called Texas Nonpartisan Political Group from Horse Barn Property Tax Reform. And it has done more to raise awareness of the complex world of local property taxes than any other entity that I know of. I've learned substantial amounts from it, and it has reach across the state. It has inspired and it's helped educate many residents, me included. We have Mr. Duaine Goulding. He is in the process. He is close to receiving enough votes to be elected. And we have Miss Kayla Lain. Miss Kayla Lain is a Godley ISD school board member, and she's going to walk through the process from the taxing entity side. So she has been elected by the people of Godley to serve the people of Godley on the school board. She's going to be here to help us address from that side of the table what goes on in making the decision to vote for the status quo or to vote for who is promising to be transparent. Also, towards the end of our show, we're going to preview the recent breaking news in Godley ISD regarding the superintendent's failure to go through a process to make sure that procedures are followed involving background checks. So we're going to hit that towards the end of our show and discuss that as well. That'll be next week's show. So before we introduce Mr. Hundley, I'm going to begin this conversation with what I came across while researching this topic. And I came across the best singular definition of exactly what the Central Appraisal District does and to who they're accountable to. So appraisal districts in Texas are responsible for estimating the monetary value of all real estate in each county for the purpose of assessing property taxes on each property. That is how your city councils get their money to operate. This is how your school boards, school districts get their money to operate. Appraisal districts in Texas are each governed by a board of directors. That member of the board of directors are nominated and elected by, again, the taxing entities, not us, the people. So appraisal districts work in conjunction with the local taxing entities to assess the property on their behalf, not your behalf. They assess the property not for you, for the purpose of serving the taxing entities. That's what these candidates are guaranteeing, that they will change and open up in the transparency process. So Miss Amy Lingo and Mr. John Wood have both secured seats. Your hard work, your dedication in influencing the city councils and school districts in Johnson County and the other small taxing entities has been instrumental in getting 2 people that have guaranteed they will open the doors in this process. So thank you for that. We need Mr. Duaine Goulding and we need Mr. Paul Jones to get elected. Definitely need at least one more to have a majority. Without a majority, the voting body can't move forward with these guarantees. So without further ado, we have Miss Kayla Lain from Godley ISD, Mr. Duaine Goulding, and Mr. Craig Hundley. Again, Craig Hundley, if you're not familiar with this Facebook group and you want to learn about this process with a lot more in depth than we can go into with an hour here, it's Texas Nonpartisan Political Group from Horse Barn Property Tax Reform. So we're in the middle of this fight to secure these votes for the people's candidates. Mr. Hundley, as usual, let's begin with you. Give us a real quick, brief background of how we got going here, and then we're going to walk into where we're at in this process with all these taxing.
Well,
entities.
I've got to start with a horse barn. It's a long story. And a few years back when I left Burleson, I may have told this story. I paid my home off, and my wife goes, well, she said, you want the good news or bad news? I said, give me the good news. Your home's paid for. I said, what's the bad news? It's going to cost you $15,000 a year to live in it. Property tax. Well, that got me worked up. And then we moved to the farm, and daughter is building her house, and she come up and she's in tears because her house was getting finished and her property tax had gone up $378 a month. Well, I'm fuming, and I'm talking to people that are just barely making it. And I'm just really getting worked up, and I'm trying to figure out how this whole system works. So I start studying the central appraisal districts. Well, they were passed into law in 1978, began in 1982. It's called the Pavito Bill. And so I started digging into it, my friend Dan Roberts and I, and then we found out, there's a group of people that control this. And they're called the, Central Appraisal District Board of Directors, and that there was an election process, and that they have total control over the chief appraiser as far as making sure he does his job properly. Now, I'm sitting in my horse barn when I think this up. So I think horse barn, political group, nonpartisan, because it affects both sides of the aisle. And that's basically how I got started. And we ran people 4 years ago for CAD board, and everybody we'd talk to from Burleson to all the cities, everybody would tell us, we didn't know about this. And we've never voted on this before. But that's how we got started.
And it's been astronomically successful, which just goes to show that there's a general dysfunction in this process with how people understand it.
And it's probably the most important election in every county.
It's a big one for sure. And and the more I look at it, the more important and the higher it goes up on my list of important things. Mr. Goulding, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
And you are securing some votes now. You're getting close to the nominee. How did you get involved with this, and why do you feel it is so important to have somebody who's going to open the door and explain these processes to people and make sure that the state and the county is doing their obligation regarding state law and going through this process?
I got involved basically because Craig recruited me. he
said, good company.
He said, if you could get selected to the CAD board of directors, would you be willing to serve? And I said, sure. How does that work? And there we go. That's how we got started. Before I get started, I want to put a rumor to rest. There's been a rumor going around that the board of directors, what we're running for is to reduce appraisals. That is not true. The board of directors does not control appraisals. The appraisals are controlled by a methodology mandated by state law. It's called the USPAP. So the board's responsibility is to ensure that the CAD is compliant with state law. That's the end of our responsibilities as it pertains to the appraisals.
Okay.
What I'm running for the CAD is a big mystery. People don't know how their appraisals are done. They don't know the processes, the methodologies, the practices. They need to know. They have a right to know. They're paying their taxes. We want to open it up, make it available. We'll establish an outreach program that says, here's how the CAD operates. Here's how they arrive at your appraisal. And if you understand it, you may not like your appraisal, but at least you know you get a fair shake if they're following a standard process, the same for everybody. That's the whole point. And if you're not getting a fair shake, you'll know that too, and you'll know how to negotiate with the CAD to get your appraisal changed. That's the only thing I'm running for. I want an open, an honest, and fair system that everybody has the opportunity to understand.
And it's fair to say that that with the right people in the right place who are committed to transparency and committed to educating the public, that there's a much greater chance for a much smaller margin for mistakes and errors to be made that potentially can do that. And why I'm talking about this is I want to talk about something that you brought to my attention and to the listeners in the last couple of shows, and it's called a data card.
Right.
Can you talk to us about the importance of a data card, what it is, and why every single property owner should understand and know what their data card is, please?
When I bought the home I'm in now 5 years ago, I got a tax statement that shocked me. So I filed a protest, and in preparation for the protest, I decided I should get a state certified appraiser to do an appraisal. So I started calling around trying to find them, and mostly what I got is, well, I'm too busy, I'm booked up, whatever. And one of them finally said, look, I can't get to it, but go look at your data card. I said, what's a data card? Go down to the CAD and ask them for your data card. They'll give it to you. And I went down the next morning and looked at it, requested it, and they printed it out and handed it to me. That data card has all the details of your property. My square footage on my house was overstated. The square footage on my porch was way overstated. And as it turned out, in the end, I did find a state certified appraiser do an appraisal, and the CAD's appraisal was 65% higher than the state certified appraiser. So I had some basis for my protest and was reasonably successful in getting it lowered to a more reasonable level. Every taxpayer should have a copy of the data card for their property and make sure it's correct, because that's the starting point, I think, for the appraisals.
So, and I want to make sure that I grasp this, because I'm really new to this, to understanding this. So what you're saying is that you were being taxed at a higher rate based on incorrect data.
I had just bought the house, so I hadn't been taxed yet.
Okay.
My appraisal was higher than I thought it should be. And in part, it was because the data card was incorrect.
Okay. So property. So you have so this is for everybody. Everybody has a piece of land. They have a piece of land, and if it's just a vacant piece of land, there's an appraisal on that. So once you start developing that land, you start putting a pool in, you start putting a shop in, you start putting a home in, this all increases the value of the property, and it all increases the appraisal value. And everything that you do, if it's not accurate, people could be paying more. And the way I understand yours and Mr. Woods and Miss Lingo's and Mr. Jones and everyone's, Mr. Jones's fight here is you're going to do outreach to the community to make sure that they understand everything to help them make sure that it's as accurate and the margin for error is as small as possible. So all the legal requirements are in as tightly knit and together as we can. That's
correct? And if you do that, everybody gets a fair shake.
And that's all we can ask for, is a fair shake. So
and let me add to it. I will make a pledge on the air right now, and I've made this in front of some city councils and school districts, that if I'm elected to the board, we will put together a presentation on how the CAD operates and what the taxpayers need to know. And we will present it at no charge to any group that wants to see it. I don't care if it's a city council, a school board, a book club, a civic club, whatever it is. Any group, we'll go give them that presentation.
So for those that aren't, intimately invested in local politics, so city council, school boards, these taxing entities, they have to run open meetings. These open meetings are based on an agenda, and our elected officials can place things on the agenda. So the way I'm understanding this is you will do outreach, and you will say, hey, we would like to be placed on the agenda and explain to your community how this process works and what they can do to better understand this process. And then these meetings are recorded, so then they can be referenced, and it becomes a basically a living encyclopedia of,
Right.
Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. And my vision of this is we'll work with the chief appraiser because he's the expert. He's the subject matter expert. We'll work with him, make sure all the contents of the presentation are accurate. And then we're not going to waste the taxpayers' money charging for it. We're just going to go out and give it to anybody that wants it. The only limitation we have is our time.
Well, and so you bring up the chief appraiser. So here again, nobody can tell you who is on the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors for the most part, and they don't do any outreach, and they just magically appear through the taxing entities. The four of you, Duaine, Goulding, Mr. Wood, Mr. Jones, Ms. Lingo, you guys are doing outreach and making yourselves available, educating people about your backgrounds and history, right?
That's correct.
And the goal is to be able to provide all this information, and people have a face with this process.
Not only that, if you go out on the CAD website, show me where you can find the schedule for the CAD board meetings. You can find the agenda. You can find the minutes. I haven't been able to find any of that information out there, and that should be public information, just like it is for the city council and the school boards.
Absolutely. And so you brought up board of directors. You brought up the chief appraisal. So why the chief appraisal, who you said is the
subject matter expert.
Okay, the subject matter expert for property appraisals.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Johnson County. He is appointed by who?
He's appointed by the board of directors and retained by the board of directors.
Okay. So why is something like this so important to people? Very simple. If only two of these individuals are elected, they have zero control if the other three want to keep the status quo. If 3 or 4 get elected, so Mr. Goulding and Mr. Jones get elected, which we need your help, and we're going to walk through who still has votes left to allocate, they have a say to make sure that the chief appraiser is as qualified as possible, is as knowledgeable as possible, and is capable of following. And that very well could be the existing chief appraiser, and it very well may need a change. However, you guys are going to make sure that you're going to do due diligence for the best interest in property tax owners. Is that correct?
That's correct. But I'm going into this assuming that everything's being done in compliance with all state laws. Everything's being run as it should be. I don't have any beef with anybody at the CAD. I just want to open it up for the taxpayers. Our taxpayers, they pay a lot of money. And they have a right to know.
And best case scenario, which we're all hoping for, is that it's all being done correctly. And what's really going to change with your guys' election is overwhelming outreach and overwhelming education of the community, so everybody's more comfortable with this process and understands it. So there's so much less, oh my gosh, my property went up this much, I don't understand why. Correct?
You're exactly right.
So Mr. Hundley,
yes,
4.5 years you've been fighting this battle, and you've recruited individuals to get into this battle. Is this all pretty much what you've learned, and what else can we wrap up in here in our first segment here before we start going into the individual taxing entities and what they're doing and who's left?
Well, that one thing I always run into between the state and the locals, they play this game called kick the can. You talk to the locals, they say you got to go to the state. When you go to the state, they tell you go back to the locals. Well, I attack both sides of the fence. But so I had a member of mine, very prominent citizen. I will not mention their name. I promised I wouldn't. So they had a complaint. So they emailed the state comptroller's office, and I want to read it.
Okay.
And okay, our office received your complaint letter about properties located in Johnson County. The comptroller's office does not have the authority over valuing the property within local county appraisal district. Property tax is not a sales tax. We all know that. But a local government tax. It is up to local government to interpret the codes that affect property tax values. Of course, they've logged their complaint, and that's pretty much the beef of the story. But
so I'm gonna bring up what I went through. So 2021, as I was learning about a Godley ISD bond, over and over and over and over and over and over and over, all they said was, we have nothing to do with property taxes. You're paying more because of the CAD. You're paying more because of the CAD. You're paying more because of the CAD. So everybody made the connection that, well, the actual school district has nothing to do with this. Lo and behold, a couple months later, the school district is actually nominating and electing the board of directors.
Yes.
That's kicking the can down the road.
yes.
So it sounds like somebody is kicking the can down the road, blaming it on the comptroller's office when it's not theirs. This is something, Mr. Goulding, that your team, this assembled team, is promising to open this up so everybody understands and has access to understand this process, correct?
That's correct. And that will be part of the presentation. And I don't want that to be the only outreach. We'll look for other ways to reach out.
And that's awesome. And the awesome the awesome thing with this is the Craig Hundley's group, Texas nonpartisan political group from Horse Barn Property Tax Reform, gives you a solid base to communicate with, to get to many, many thousands of individuals.
That will help us get the word out.
Absolutely. So we're getting close to our first intermission here. I'm going to preview where we're going with the second one. So we're going to start talking to Miss Kayla Lain shortly into our second segment as we walk down each taxing entities, the Johnson County cities, the Johnson County ISDs, and how they voted so far, who's left to vote. Miss Kayla Lain is going to give her insight as to being a member of the taxing entity and what goes into this discussion and how this vote's made. And towards the end of our show, we're going to preview next week's show. There's a lot going on at Godley ISD with some safety issues concerning background checks. And we're going to talk very briefly at the chain of events that discuss what Miss Lain had to go through to make sure that the approval process for volunteers in Godley ISD went through. You don't want to miss that. This show's focused on the Central Appraisal District, but what's going on at Godley ISD is important enough that we're going to focus on that. So here again, we're going to talk about the cities and the ISDs, who's voted where, and why it's important that the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors has a majority of people that are committed to bringing transparency, openness, outreach to how this property appraisal works, to disseminate all confusion. Back with the breakdown here after the break.
Here's important new information from the Diabetes Solution Center for you, a family member, or a loved one suffering with diabetes. If you have lost your provider, or if you need a provider for diabetic supplies, you may qualify to receive your diabetic testing supplies now with little or no out-of-pocket cost, regardless of your age. All you need is Medicare or private insurance to be potentially eligible. Call the Diabetes Solution Center right now for details. Just takes a couple of minutes. Our friendly, knowledgeable agents will give you free, no-obligation information, handle all the insurance paperwork, and make sure your supplies are delivered directly to your door for free.
Call U.S. Medical Supply 24 hours a day. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. 800-597-9323. Call right now. 800-597-9323.
Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. Fast Track Student Loans can get your student loans out of default, stop any wage garnishments, stop collection calls, and stop seizure of your tax refund. Give yourself a break. Stop the stress and get your student loan payments down to as little as $25 a month based on what you can afford to pay. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395. 800-709-4395.
Welcome back to the breakdown. We're here talking about Central Appraisal District Board of Directors, and then we're getting ready to start talking about the individual taxing entities. But before we get into that, we want to reach out to how this radio operates. We want to make sure that everybody understands JoCo Community Radio is proud to be the voice of Johnson County, Texas, and is live 24/7 on the TuneIn Radio Network. www.tuneinjoco.com is the place to find all the ways to listen and watch, and the station app is also available for free on Android and Apple devices. Simply search your store, check out our lineup and more at www.jococommunityradio.com. This episode and more brought to you by Next Level Claims, making your insurance work for you. Reach out to your Texas sales rep at 844 Tex Hale, 844 Tex Hale. That's 844-839-4245. And be sure to dress your arms and more at the tiffy.com. And as we get into this colder weather into winter, it'll be really important that we start looking at some of what's available at the tiffy.com. So we're here back with Duaine Goulding, Mr. Craig Hundley, and Miss Kayla Lain. And now we're going to start talking about the individual taxing entities and what they've done so far and who's left to push the people's candidates over the top to start opening the central appraisal districts and how everybody views that. So Mr. Hundley, Mr. Goulding, you guys have been to a lot of city council meetings.
As many as we can.
And you've been to a lot of school board meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And before we talk about the individual ones, we really want to do a shout out to Johnson County because they pretty much were leading the way and really allocated all their votes to you guys. So we really want to, before we get into the more local districts, Johnson County really did a great job. Is it fair to say that?
Commissioners and our county judge love them.
Yep, they supported us all the way.
So
they support the people,
and that's what this is about. That's what this is about. They take in the body of information and they reach out to their constituency, and they should gauge the community, and they should allocate their votes what they feel is in the best interest for the community based on all their information. Is it fair to say that?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So you've been to lots of cities and you've been to lots of school districts. The most recent one you were at was Godley ISD School Board. Is that correct?
Yes.
So at Godley ISD, how did you guys feel about the process that they went through and how they run their meetings and how they allocated their votes for the Central Appraisal District Board of Directors?
Well, they run like most other school boards. What I detected clearly was a split in their board. Half of the board that was present supported this outreach transparency that we're advocating and supported us fully. The other half did not support us. They wanted to support the insiders, the incumbents. And so the vote wound up getting split up accordingly.
Mr. Hundley?
I agree with that.
You agree with that?
I didn't like how, when I came in, anybody else if somebody was running late, we could fill out a card for them to speak. Not there. Mr. Woods was running late. Gentleman picked it up. He said, "Did you fill this out?" And I go, "Yes." He took it away from me.
So you're talking about open meetings, Texas Open Meetings Act, and how it operates. So from experience, Godley ISD is, and I go to a lot of city council meetings and school boards. They're the most restrictive and they're the most difficult to open up to open meetings. I spent a lot of time in Austin, and I can absolutely during the meetings add my name and speak. And they're overwhelming accommodating. Joshua ISD during board work sessions will ask, does anybody else have anything to add?
Yes.
I call it the Kayla Lain rule. And there's been a lot of changes, Miss Kayla Lain, that have made it more difficult for free speech. And they require you to sign up early, and they keep moving the goalposts, making it more difficult. And it's absolutely ridiculous.
Can I add one thing
Yes,
that
sir.
is a sharp difference from every other place we've been? Every place we've been, you signed up to speak. You listed an agenda item you're going to speak on, and you don't speak until they come to that agenda item. Every single entity operated that way until we got to Godley. And then they wanted all of the speakers during the public presentation portion. And so you had to get up and talk, make whatever comments you were going to make, and reference your agenda item that you were talking about. So that jammed, I forget, it was like 10 different speakers and not all of us covering the same topic into about a 30-minute block. That was difficult for me because I was talking about an agenda item that 6, 7 other people had nothing to say about.
Well, another thing they do is they're so Region 11 has 76 school districts. There's only 5 that don't let you talk on an open item. Godley ISD restricts you to an agenda item, which is another suppression of free speech. And we don't want to get too much into Godley ISD now. They got their issues, and I encourage everybody that is only familiar with Godley ISD, and including current trustees of Godley ISD, to reach out to other school districts and go to those meetings and go to those city council meetings and see what right looks like, because what you're doing is not right. And it is what it is, but you have your nice little wall of honor there. You want to brag on people. But you know what? If I was on your wall of honor, I'd be demanding my face gets taken off because you suppress the First Amendment rights and freedom of speech, and it's shameful. That's a whole nother story, and we'll get to that next week before I get too upset here. But we're going to focus on the Central Appraisal District. But so talking about Godley ISD, Miss Kayla Lain, most recently elected school board trustee. You're learning as you go. As you sit on that board, first, let's talk with how many of the current Central Appraisal Board of Directors that are existing sitting members right now reached out to Godley ISD and asked for your support and educated you on who they were.
None of them reached out to me.
Okay. How does the process go of sitting on that side of the table as you make this decision? And the reason I'm asking this is because during the nomination process back in September, Godley ISD was asked to nominate the people that would be on the board of directors. However, somebody, most likely the superintendent or at his direction, actually tried to allocate the votes to the existing central appraisal districts during the nomination. Is that correct?
That's how it was worded on the motion, but we were voting on the nomination. It just became very confusing because on the motion, there was a breakout of votes allocated, but we were only nominating. So that's where the confusion came in. And I was able to call the Central Appraisal District and get that cleared up.
And so why is that a problem? Well, number one, because 4 people were allocated the votes in a handwritten motion to the trustees. Mr. Goulding's name wasn't even an option. Mr. Jones's name wasn't an option. Miss Lingo's name wasn't an option. So here again, this is this funneling and this bottleneck, and it's a problem. And it's an absolutely problem. However, they didn't end up voting for the incumbents, which is a great thing, because originally it was the equal allocation to the 4 sitting board of directors members. It didn't go that way. It actually did get done, and it was done, and there was some positivity that did come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was done properly. It was only a nomination. It's just when we went back and looked at the agenda, and when I looked at my board book, there was confusion because in that nomination there was an allocation of votes, and it's just not normally done that way. So there was some confusion there, but it was just a nomination. So, and I contacted the Central Appraisal District, found out they had not received Godley ISD votes, so I knew that it would be coming up at this November meeting because it had to be done by December. And so I was able to, at our last meeting, make my recommendation that we give our votes to Mr. Duaine Goulding because he was the third closest to getting a nomination. And as you mentioned, the other two had already secured the nomination.
So you made a motion and it failed. It was 3-3. Trustee Marissa Abbott, Trustee Dennis McFarland voted with you. Trustee Craig Stevenson, Trustee Terry Goodlow, and Trustee Matt McKittrick decided to not allocate the votes to who the people have asked to represent them. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I really have to give a shout out to Marissa Abbott because my motion could have failed for lack of second, like several of my motions have before. But she did second my motion. And so it was up for vote. And my motion was that all of our 229 votes would go to Mr. Duaine Goulding. So he would be able to get closer to securing that election on the CAD board. And then, like you said, it was a 3-3 vote. So I have to give a shout out to Dennis McFarland and Marissa Abbott that voted with me to give all of those votes to Mr. Goulding. Matt McKittrick, Craig Stevenson, and Terry Goodlow, they gave all of their votes to incumbents.
So before we move on to the rest of these and get Mr. Hundley and Mr. Goulding back involved with the individual districts, I think it was shameful what Trustee Terry Goodlow did. She was asked very specifically, well, why do you support the people that you did? And she basically said, well, they're my friends. I've known them for very well. I don't. My best friend does not mean they're qualified to do electricity at my house. I don't care how good of a Christian somebody is. It doesn't mean they can unclog my toilet. It doesn't mean that. And to make decisions based on those personal relationships, you want to talk about old town politics? That's old town politics right there.
Yes.
That is old town politics. And I am sorry that you guys were received that way in Godley ISD. And I think it was shameful. Her justification for what she did. I'm all about if she can justify her votes and they don't, and I'm not happy with them. Hey, you win some, you lose some, but that justification was terrible. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? I don't want to.
Yes. So the point is they asked her why she supported certain people. She couldn't tell them because they do not know what goes on behind closed doors. I mean, when you got an answer, she's just a good friend and a Christian. That's not a good answer.
You can be the best person in the world. Doesn't mean you're qualified to do this. So,
yeah.
Well, I think she wasn't considering the outreach, the transparency. She was more focused on the friendships. And she's not the only, and Godley's not the only part of the county that did that. This is not unique to Godley.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that look at it that way.
So we have a comment here by Jeff Neal, and he says, so he wasn't nominated, but yet got votes. I'm glad he got the votes, and I wish he would have gotten all of them. But what does the nomination process matter if those nominations didn't consume all the votes? And Jeff Neal is 100% correct. But the problem with how this was done is the nomination included the superintendent or designee's allocation of votes without even bringing to the board's attention all of the potential people who could be voted for. And the school district has a vested interest in inflated appraisals because they're addicted to money. They're addicted to the government tit. And that's the reality of it. It doesn't matter who Kayla nominated. The matter is that the school district should not be telling the trustees who the people elect who they should vote for. That's the problem.
I do want to address Jeff Neal's question. I was not asked who to nominate. The nomination was done. The motion had who we were supposed to nominate, and it was a vote yes or no. But to answer his question, Mr. Craig Hundley, an individual has to get so many nominations to even be able to be on the ballot, correct?
Yes.
To be electable. So the nominations definitely matter because if you don't get enough nominations, you can't even be on the ballot to be elected to the CAD board. Do you know how many nominations that they needed?
And honestly, all we had to do was go to one entity like City of Burleson, and they nominated all four of us. And we would have been on the ballot from then on, but we went to every entity and they continued renominating us. We just went above and beyond.
And you know what? And that speaks volumes. And that speaks volumes. And as a taxpayer, I appreciate that. I want people that we're entrusting in public trust. I want them to reach out and to do that, not to sit behind closed doors and smoke in smoke-filled rooms and make decisions. So so let's get on to these things. So another ISD. We got two ISDs, two polar opposites. So Godley kind of split the votes. Some good things happened, some bad things happened. Joshua ISD, Miss Nene Wilson, rock star.
Yes.
Thank you, Joshua ISD. I've had some differences with Joshua ISD. Explain to me how Joshua ISD went for you guys.
They went 100%, but I was expecting zero support. And Jeff, you were there. I mean, now, Greg, I called you Jeff. Sorry.
He appreciates the compliment.
I know he does. But you and I were sitting at that before the school board meeting, and we talked. And I think I just kind of let out my heart how I felt. And we got up to go to Burleson. And you said to me, Craig, they've made up their minds. They're not getting you're not getting any votes.
I was worried. Joshua ISD is notoriously awesome because they open board work sessions and they discuss things, but they didn't discuss this, and I got nervous.
Yeah. And we get to Burleson, and my text message goes off, and it's Nene Wilson. She goes, John Woods. And I text back, what do you mean? We gave him all of our votes. Well, that's when I almost fell out of my chair.
Rock star. Great job.
And I can say the same thing about Kirby Basham, the superintendent of Grandview ISD. They're amazing. They gave us all of their votes. I mean, if you think about it, Grandview ISD and Joshua ISD, if I'm not mistaken, are both schools are rated top 10% academically in the state.
It's funny how the better academically prepared schools, the more fiscally responsible schools, how they actually listen to the people and they operate a little better. It's kind of funny how that works. But so we've talked about Joshua ISD, we talked about Grandview ISD, we talked about Godley ISD. Let's talk about Cleburne ISD.
Okay. Well, Amy Lingo went to that meeting. I will say they were one school board member who reached out to me, and he got two of us nominated during the nomination process. And of course, Amy, she was there, and she said they were kind of stuck, but they gave all their votes 100% to one member, Vance Castles, who is a fine, upstanding person in Cleburne. So he's already elected, and if our group was going to serve with anybody, that's the guy I would want.
Well, at least they did that. So did they go during the school board meeting that you guys were at? Did they go through the process of explaining why they did this, or did they just do it?
Amy would have to be here to tell me, but she said they just all voted 100%, all their votes to Vance Castles.
Yeah. And see, here's another problem. Like, especially when you have people reaching out, justify why you're doing what you're doing, because it's okay to disagree, but you need to justify it, explain it, and be transparent about it. Fair to say, Mr. Goulding?
I agree, but let me say the incumbents, I don't know all of them, but from what I hear, they're good, upstanding citizens. They're good people. They just haven't reached out to the taxpayers in the past. They have continued business as usual, as it's been done here in Johnson County for decades. Mm-hmm. It's never going to change until we change it. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to change it. That doesn't mean anybody's a bad person. It just means it's time for a change.
And that's what Godley ISD is doing, and that's what the community Godley did by electing Chris Lanker for mayor recently, Gabrielle Mize, Jen Thompson when they elected Jen Thompson, and Kayla Lain for ISD school board. Yes. So change is happening everywhere. It's great to see that. The
taxpayers, the way I hear it, talking to my friends and whatnot, the taxpayers want a change.
I agree. Yeah.
They're not going to get a change if they don't call the school boards that have yet to vote. The entities have yet to vote and demand change. I want these taxpayer advocates that advocate for transparency on the board. And I'm going to watch how you vote.
Absolutely. So before we get into who has left to vote, we want to highlight Burleson too. Mayor Chris Fletcher, Burleson City Council. What I was thoroughly impressed with was the discussion they had about this. They bounced this around. They talked about it. They spent a lot of time trying to calculate what was in the best interest of their citizens, and phenomenal job, Burleson ISD.
Oh, yes.
You and I were there together, Craig.
Burleson City Council.
I'm sorry,
City
Burleson
Council.
City Council. Yes, excuse me. Burleson City Council, Burleson ISD. Pay attention, Burleson ISD. Because no matter how you vote, do your due diligence. Burleson ISD has their votes left, but I was thoroughly impressed with
Dan
Burleson City
McClendon,
Council.
Victoria Johnson, amazing. The whole council was amazing. Chris Fletcher, rock star.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, we're not going to have time to get into every single city. We want to touch base with who has left to vote. So December 11th, Burleson ISD, they have 843 votes, a massive amounts of votes. I want to let everybody know I reached out to Burleson ISD. I requested to be placed on their distribution list for media. They were responsive. Their meeting will be December 11th. They're not having one this Monday. There were some rumors. It's going to be December 11th. Hopefully Burleson ISD is paying attention. If you choose to vote with the incumbents, explain it in open meetings why you're making that decision. Please do that and listen to these candidates as they reach out. Listen to these candidates and why they are attempting to secure your votes and what they're offering your community, your tax base. Listen, Burleson ISD. Thoughts on how that's working?
Well, they should support their constituents.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
Burleson ISD has the largest voting block behind the Johnson County Commissioners Court.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. ISDs are obviously bigger than city limits. They can literally make Burleson, your 843 votes are you can strategically position those votes and allocate those votes to make a dramatic difference in this process. And when it comes time to ask for a bond, when it comes time to ask for a voucher, when it comes time to ask for your public support, when things go bad in your accounting and you're trying to do things better, you can lean back on these type of decisions. When you listened to your community, you explained it and communicated with your community on why you did what you did. Fair to say, guys?
Yes. Taxpayers will support open, transparent
100%.
communication from their elected officials. I don't care if it's a school board or the state legislature. They want to know. And if you let them know, usually you get their support.
Absolutely. And City of Mansfield, they have Alvarado ISD. Alvarado ISD has 334 votes coming up. Or no, Alvarado ISD
they already
secured.
voted.
I'm
Yes.
sorry. Venus ISD. So Venus ISD, there's a little confusion. Their next posted date that we know of is December 18th, which is behind the date. So we're going to reach out to them and maybe they need a special meeting or something.
Yes.
I don't know what they're going to do, but we'll reach out to them.
Yeah. So they got
Mansfield ISD is the other significant block of votes that they're meeting on the 12th.
Yep. And Mansfield ISD, they're meeting on December 12th. They have 265 votes. Mansfield ISD, you got a footprint in a couple counties. You too can rely on this. And we only got a couple minutes left. So I want to make sure that, some of these school districts are very dependent on their absolutists. They're individuals that tooth and nail drive home very, very bully-esque, and they drive home the message of the ISD, irregardless of whether it's right or wrong, irregardless of what they're saying. And and you guys should encourage openness, encourage transparency. It's absolutely important to do that. And
just to recap, the upcoming votes, you have Burleson ISD, you have Mansfield ISD, and you have Venus ISD. So if you reside within those districts, make sure to reach out to your elected officials and ask them to support Duaine Goulding and Mr. Paul Jones.
If you're a taxpayer in Johnson County, you care about this CAD board, whether you're in that district or not, reach out.
And for a lot of the school districts, they're they actually pull a substantial amount of their tax dollars from outside their footprint. Godley ISD pulls over 50% outside the Godley ISD footprint. If you pay taxes, money as yours is going to some of these school districts. So don't feel that just because you don't live there, you don't have a say, because they are incapable, some of these smaller communities like Godley ISD, from operating within their own means. Therefore, they're dependent on outside tax dollars. So just because you don't live there, don't feel you can't reach out. Don't feel you can't reach out. And because your tax dollars are going to these things. So we're going to real quick, we're going to talk about next week's show.
And really quick, JC Clayton had a really important comment that showing up matters. A lot of people don't show up to these school board meetings and these city council meetings.
Correct.
It's important to show up and to speak to your elected officials. Show up to these, to Burleson, to Mansfield ISD, Venus ISD, and say you want them to support the taxpayers and these citizens for the CAD board. Showing up matters.
Yeah, it's not hard to go to meetings once you start going. Just bite the bullet and go and participate in local governments. Kayla, real quick before we get last minute thoughts, really, really fast, give us a rundown of the failure of Godley ISD administration to do the right thing, which caused a very, very ugly situation to have to go public.
Yes, I'm going to link a video that I did earlier today with Mary Lowe and Lynn Davenport from Families Engaged. We're really focusing on the core issue of this problem, which is the failure to act on the Godley ISD superintendent, Dr. Deere. The focus was never supposed to be on the individual. Of course, we have no control over Fox 4 News. We have no control over how they spun that story. I am highly disappointed that they placed the focus on the individual rather than the superintendent. And where the blame really needs to fall is with the superintendent and how he mishandled that situation when we brought it to his attention. So I'm going to link a video here in the comments that people can go ahead and watch in preparation for next week. But the focus really needs to be with the ISD and how they dropped the ball, and how when they were notified of this potential situation, they should have acted on it. They should have.
They failed to act. They failed to act. Period.
Yes.
Period.
And instead of acting, they attacked the whistleblowers.
Fair enough. Mr. Goulding, Mr. Hundley, real quick, last thoughts. Besides, get out and vote and support your candidates.
Come to Burleson ISD. Come to Mansfield ISD. I'll meet you there.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Great
Thank
show.
you, Greg.
Yep. Take care.
Thank you, Greg.
Breakdown next week, Thursday at 5. Godley ISD, shameful, but you did something good this week. Good on you.
From Burleson to Venus and Grandview to Godley, this is the voice of Johnson County, JoCo Community Radio.
Here's important new information